8th episode. We've been doing this 8 times. 8 times now, and you guys keep letting us get away with it. Hi, I'm Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
And I'm young Harrison Ford.
Yeah, and we are Premiere Reviews. Audio listeners, you guys keep downloading our podcast on Spotify and on Apple Music and wherever else it is. We do so much for the video ones on YouTube, and you guys just don't. You won't listen.
Go watch.
Yeah, go watch it. I'm literally wearing a cropped off dress shirt right now to outfit match a single frame in the film. Because I promised our video listeners that we'd be dressing up for this one.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
It's very warm.
It is
very warm.
Yeah, I really lucked out. See, I was like, well, aren't you glad you get to be the straight man? And then it's 90 degrees in here right now, and we can't turn on the AC because the mics will pick it up.
Yeah.
So,
but it's okay. This is what we do for the video.
Yeah, for the video that nobody watches.
It's okay. They'll watch this one.
They will. Go to youtube.com/Premiere Reviews, right? Is that our...
It's probably close enough. Just if you go to YouTube, you just look up Premiere Reviews Podcast.
Mm-hmm. We'll be the 300th one down.
No, we're pretty close.
We're pretty close up?
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Are you sure it's not just your algorithm?
That's a fair point, actually. I'm pretty sure. I don't know.
Well, we'll link it in our others as well.
Yeah.
So, this is the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny episode.
It is, which is the newest indie film to come out.
Unless you're watching this way in the future when they've already made 2 more of them.
Yeah.
In which case, this was the 4th one. No, wait, is this the 5th one, technically?
This is the 5th one,
the 5th one. Although a lot of people don't like the 4th one. So.
Yeah.
But we can get into that later. Right now, though, I feel like we should... There's a few things that we want to talk about with this episode. Primarily, I think we want to compare this film with the other films, because in a space dominated by remakes and reboots, and just endless sequels, I think it's fair enough to compare it with what it's coming from, the series it's coming from. And Will is actually a big Indiana Jones fan, at least way bigger than me. So, so I think that'd be an interesting conversation to have.
And I don't know if that's something that I should be proud of, but but I have seen all of the films multiple times, many times.
Tangent. There's Indiana Jones fans did this huge quest to find the hat. And it's way more... I'm a Star Wars huge super fan. And the degrees to which Indiana Jones fans went to secure a good enough replica of his hat sounds insane even to me. And I just bought a resin printer specifically to print tiny little miniatures for my Star Wars Dungeons and Dragons games. It's insane. Indiana Jones fans I have massive respect for it. So I think you can be proud of that.
Okay. Okay.
Especially since you already have a girlfriend, so it's okay that you're...
that I can,
you don't have to hide it anymore.
Well, all right. Well, we can dive in here and start talking about it. This will be a spoiler episode, so if you haven't seen the film yet,
I think can we lay this out? All of our episodes are spoiler episodes. If they haven't already been,
right.
I'm gonna set that out right now. So anyone who didn't watch this episode is just gonna get screwed over because they're not gonna get a spoiler warning anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But hopefully, most of you have listened to us. So, but yes, so this is the newest indie film, which I'm sure that you've seen the ads for it if you have a smartphone, because they were advertising it like crazy, and it's a highly anticipated new installment to the franchise. Of course,
which, unlike Elemental, was actually advertised.
Yeah, that's true.
Or Ruby Gillman. Teenage Kraken.
I mean, those are both animated films that they didn't promote very much, and they're not doing super well, but anyway. So this was released June 30th. Oh, I'm just going to talk about some of the technical things. Released June 30th of this year, is directed by James Mangold, which this is the only Indiana Jones film not directed by the one and only Steven Spielberg. and we'll talk about some of the differences in their directing styles here in a bit.
Did Spielberg direct the last one too?
He did, yeah.
Oh, maybe it was time for a change.
Yeah, if you're familiar with the fourth one, which was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's very, it's got a lot of mixed reviews.
They're not mixed. It's all negative.
Well, I mean, some if you're a hardcore Indiana Jones fan, it's pretty one-sided. And I think okay, this isn't talking about the Crystal Skull episode, but
yeah.
I have a lot to say about that one. But anyway,
future episode plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So the story for this film was by it was George Lucas and Philip Kaufman, which is
George Lucas wrote the story for this one?
It's story by, yeah, but he didn't write the screenplay.
No, I imagine he didn't write the screenplay, but still.
So just the idea. Screenplay was written by James Mangold, Jez Butterworth, David Cope, John Henry Butterworth. The Butterworth name? Is that where?
Butterworth. I don't know why I just imagine maple syrup.
Mrs. Butterworth?
Yeah, like Mrs. Butterworth's. Butterworth's.
So that's screenplay. This was distributed by the Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures, which this is the first and only Disney, I guess, produced / distributed Indiana Jones film in the franchise.
Yeah, don't let the ride confuse you. They didn't have any before. They didn't have any Disney.
Oh yeah.
Like,
but then Disney got a hold of the.
And I will say, without getting too much into it, you can definitely tell this is a Disney Indiana Jones movie.
Yes, compared to the others, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But it was distributed. The other 4 were by Paramount. And of course, it has Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones, Mads Mikkelsen as. Oh, you could probably pronounce the character's name better than I. Jürgen Voller. Yeah. It's German.
Jürgen Voller. Voller, sorry. V's are F's in German, so Jürgen Voller.
That's cool.
Yeah, right? Isn't that? I spent, I think it was $12,000 a semester in order to be able to say that to you.
And you missed it the first time.
And I missed it the first time, yeah.
Anyway. So and then Phoebe Waller-Bridge as Helena Shaw. That's the core. I guess the 3 main cast members. There's other. Antonio Banderas is also in it for a short time, but it's got a budget of $300 million, which is the most expensive indie film to make, and that's
$100 million more than The Flash, and you can tell.
Yeah. And then so far, let's see, as of one day ago, it has only made $250 million worldwide at the box office.
And working at a movie theater, I probably could have told you that. It's been popping off, but not really in numbers that that I'm sure Disney was anticipating.
Right. With how much they spent on advertising as well. That $300 million doesn't necessarily include advertising, which that's another.
I mean, advertising can almost double a film's budget.
150 million, maybe, especially with how much they've been doing. But it's rough, and I think that's the big issue with a lot of these big Bloster film.
We got Bloster fire incoming.
These blockbuster films right now they're not performing to the level that the studios are expecting, and it's hurting.
They can't generate hype, like they do all the advertising and stuff. And this kind of goes back to the superhero fatigue they were talking about in the Flash episode. Yeah. But like corporations, you can just throw money at advertising, sure, and I'm sure there's a lot of really smart people who studied advertising for many years. And there's all these studies done. And so obviously you want to listen to those experts. But at the same time, your movies keep flopping and you keep advertising them like crazy. And I don't know, like, you guys need to find a better way to generate hype than just throwing a bunch of 30-second ads at like a TikTok or anything like that, because it's not working.
Yeah, but I guess what's kind of weird about this film specifically is it has had a huge fan base following prior to this. So, I don't know if the fans just aren't going to see it, or I think they are, and that's partly why it's
not a complete failure.
Yeah, it's why it's not a complete failure. I know that the early reviews of it were extremely bad, but it has gone up at least 30% in rating since the original reviews. So, and I think that most of that comes from its fan base. But yeah, I mean it's rough. It's a rough market.
It's hard to be a fan these days.
Yeah,
everyone hates the thing that you like, including
true.
You. But you refuse to let it fail, and so you go see it because it's the thing that you like. But you don't like this one, but you want to make another one. So
it's a cycle.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you just really briefly what your opinion was of it. Like, what did you think of it?
I thought it was a very enjoyable film to watch. I very much enjoyed watching it. I was on the edge of my seat for most of the movie. I think that overall, it wasn't exactly like I keep telling people, it's by no means the best Indiana Jones film, and it's not. I'm not going to say it's like amazingly well crafted or well constructed or anything, but I really do think people are being harder on it than it necessarily deserves. One big we're gonna get into spoiler territory real quick,
yeah.
But one of my brother's big things in the middle of the theater, because there's a lot of time, there's time travel, not a lot of time travel, there's time travel here, and they go back to Roman times, and we were in the movie theater. And then they start shooting at the soldiers, at the Romans who just hit their plane with the thing. And my brother was just like in the middle of the theater, just like, he was like, what? And then I was so mad because I didn't have my voice at that point, so I couldn't tell. I ended up having to make a Soy Jack meme of him to get him to understand. But they were characters who had been established as shooting minor inconveniences without any real consideration for the consequence. And so the kid, everyone kept being like, yeah, they went back in time and they just shot a bunch of Roman soldiers for no reason, when they could have just climbed. But it's I don't. Again, that's so nitpicky and stupid, especially given it's like they just watched the film and disregarded anything that would make it make sense, and then decided to hold it to that level.
Well, yeah, because so they weren't, when they were trying to time travel, they didn't intend to go to the to that back that far. Yep. They were just trying to go back to was it 1939?
Yeah,
right?
Something like that, to go meet Hitler and kill him.
But they went all the way back to the Roman time. So it's obviously they were panicking and they didn't know what to do because the Romans were trying to shoot the plane down anyways. Yeah. So it's
and granted, it was spears and stuff, but again, my brother, and here's the thing: people are harsh on this movie, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be harsh on movies, because you should, and I feel like we need to hold a lot of films to higher standards. But if you can't suspend your disbelief for 30 seconds that an airplane that just traveled through time to a time they didn't understand, almost just crashed, and then just got hit, isn't climbing higher to get away from it all, if you can't suspend your disbelief just that much, then I don't know what to tell you. I'm all for just movies not doing things that are so stupid, and I gave Flash a lot of stuff, a lot of flack for this because I just couldn't suspend my disbelief as far as it needed me to go. But I really don't think, especially given all the stuff that we've seen in Indiana Jones, I don't think that there's much. I don't think it's asking you to take leaps and bounds unlike Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, of like believability. If you bought into the stuff from the other movies, then there's not really much here, unless you're like don't like time travel, which I don't. But again, I was still able to suspend my disbelief for it because I've bought into all the other stuff that Indiana Jones has done, and it made enough sense for that. I didn't feel like it was trampling on all that or just jumping the shark, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first film in the franchise, Indy fights off a Nazi army, and then ancient spirits come out of the Ark of the Covenant, and they
kill everybody.
They burn the Nazis. One dude's face melts. Another dude's head explodes, Belloc's character. And then another Nazi's head like implodes and crushes itself. Yeah. So that
and then
they
and then next film they go next film people's hearts get pulled out of them and they have like a portal to hell or whatever.
Thuggy Colt.
Yeah, Colt, shrinking head, stuff like that. And then in the next film you have a guy who's lived for like hundreds and hundreds of years guarding a goblet that kills you.
The Holy Grail.
I wanted to pour my drink and then drink from it, but I'm pretty sure
it's a prop.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure what happened to the guy who drank from the wrong cup would happen to me because that's probably filled with lead paint.
I can't confirm nor deny that, but anyway. So I agree with you in that it's like you gotta, it's an Indiana Jones film, and
You can suspend your disbelief. You can, and I'm not saying just give it a free pass when movies do stupid things, but it's really not that much of a leap from what we've seen in other Indiana Jones stuff. I don't feel.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about, I guess, a little bit of your issues with it, or?
Yeah. So my issues are specifically, I didn't feel like the construction of the film was super solid or tight. I will say it did avoid in a lot of instances, and again, it's been like a week since I've seen it, so maybe upon a rewatch I might feel a bit differently about this, but I think it's either Trey Parker or Matt Stone was like, if you're, his big advice for writing was, if you're writing a script, and it reads like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, you're screwed. That's a terrible script. It's not going to do anything. What your script should be doing is this happens, therefore, or however, or because, then that's good. So long as there's like that causality that keeps driving it forwards. And I felt like the script had that. Upon my first watch, I didn't feel like it just kept going, this happens. Now this is happening. Now this is happening. Everything felt like it was built upon from the previous thing that had happened. And that's very integral to how Indiana Jones, especially like their combat and fight scenes, that's integral to the construction of those. So I felt like did really good with that. But the overall construction and the story wasn't particularly compelling to me. I thought it had some good concepts about like abandonment or like redemption. I thought it had a really cool theme of like the like history, because a big thing of Indiana Jones' character is like in the film is that people don't care anymore about what happened, about the past, and so people like him are getting sort of left behind, and no one really cares because he's done all these really great things, but people don't really care anymore. And I thought that was cool, but it wasn't really, it was all in the background, and I felt like that should have been more in the foreground, especially because the villain does a whole, the world has forgotten about people like you and me. It's just so easy, they cast us aside. And my brother, like, scoffed at that in the theater, which I could understand because it wasn't really built on. But, I mean, it is there. They're both men who have such a deep understanding and appreciation of history and who love learning from the mistakes and stuff like that. Men who are willing to learn from the past. And they're in a world that just only wants to look towards the future. And they're forgetting all the lessons of the past. And so, like, that dynamic is there, but it's not built on, and it really should have been. It should have been more in the foreground, I think. So those were my bigger issues with it. Also, the blending of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character and their what's the kid's name? I don't know, but yeah. So like stuff like I feel like there could have been a lot better work done with them, like especially the kid. I felt like didn't get much. Like Short Round in the second film was pretty integral.
Yeah, he was one of the main characters, and I guess I mean because I don't remember this kid's name either, and I guess that's that shows that he was just kind of there, and he didn't really do anything to help.
Now the question is,
story?
Yeah, do we remember Short Round because it's a very recognizable name that's a little bit racist, or is it that this guy was just like forgettable? And
Short Round was very intertwined with the story of Temple of Doom. You know, I mean, if you're familiar with it, he's the one after Indiana Jones he drinks the blood of Kali and he gets into this trance and he's trying to kill Willie Scott. Short Round is the one that pulls him out of that. Yeah. And he actively moves the story forward also by releasing all of the children in the mines. Now, I can't necessarily think of an instance where the kid in this film did anything like that. Looking back on it,
in the chase scenes, he helped and stuff,
kind of
but
in
like
Tangier.
In Tangier, but
I guess, but
again, there were moments that like could have been done by someone else, and it would have like it wasn't only he was able to do it. He gets sort of reduced to like a MacGuffin. Like a damsel in distress thing, and then he goes back in time too, but he doesn't. I don't think he really helps when they're back. Oh well, I guess he brings the plane to them, but I don't know. I didn't feel particularly entwined with his character, and he did the important thing of giving them an escape route out of the time, but. I don't know. I feel like his character needed more development because I thought it was really cool. Look at this. He's this poor kid growing up in a country, talking to like pilots and stuff, trying to figure out how to fly a plane with his own stuff. He's a smart guy, but he just wasn't really developed. Like he had that big spurt of development, and then he was useful at the end, and then he was a MacGuffin for the rest of it. So I felt like he needed a little more development.
Well, that and I mean, Helena Shaw said that she found him trying to pickpocket her, so then that's why he's with her. Yeah. But that was the same story with Short Round and Indy.
Yeah,
he tried to pickpocket him. So
here's the thing. I think what they were trying to do was try and draw a parallel between Indiana and Helena, but they didn't really develop it because I feel like the whole idea was to draw a parallel between the two, and it just the whole point of Short Round, and then what was her name? What was the love interest
in Temple of Doom?
Yeah, in Temple of Doom.
Willie Scott.
Willie Scott, yeah. Like that whole dynamic was about showing Indy as in a sort of like proto-family familial type thing where you had the person they loved and they had like this surrogate son. And that was sort of what they wanted to do with Phoebe's character, Helena, where they were giving her like a proto-son type deal, but they didn't really explore with her taking up like the mantle of responsibility really. Like she was just like, no, like, I mean, obviously she cared for him, but I don't know, they flip-flop between her, like, they just sort of hand-waved whatever her emotions would be for it, which I don't know. I feel like they could have done a bit better with those dynamics. So the character dynamics I felt like needed to be much stronger.
Yeah. I can agree with that. I enjoyed it, though, as well. Just the whole overall story and feeling of it. As a big Indiana Jones fan, I did go into it having really high expectations. Was looking forward to it for a long time, and there were elements of it overall that I I wish that they had done better. I know you had mentioned earlier the whole opening train sequence, which is really cool because they de-aged Harrison Ford for the first 20 minutes of the film, and it felt like a classic indie film, you know. But they did this new de-aging technology that they've been kind of messing around with, and it wasn't perfect. You know, you can see certain shots they spent more time and money on than others, but the potential was there, and you saw that there were certain shots and angles. It's like, wow, that looks like young Indy, but you know, I think the biggest thing was also that the mouth didn't line up to the dialogue necessarily in that first sequence. So that was kind of an issue that I had. I wish that they had, I don't know, maybe spent
less money on the advertising budget that didn't work.
Yeah, and tried to spend more time on some of those sections. But it was good, and unfortunately, I mean, Harrison Ford he's just old. So, and you could see that through the film. But I do think that they did a good job of showing his age and allowing his age to take a new type of Indiana Jones character. They didn't make it so unbelievable to the point where it's like Indiana Jones is swinging with his whip from place to place anymore, and he's not climbing on top of trucks and trains, and you know, they played into his age, and I think in certain ways that was, I think, executed well, but you know, it's just when you go see an indie film, you want to see Indiana Jones do these action things, and unfortunately he's just old and they just weren't able to do certain things. But
I kind of feel, you reminded me about this point that I wanted to bring up. I feel kind of in the opposite. Like, he does all these things in the film. He like jumps from car to car, does all these things. I feel like they use his age more as like a character tool for like what in D&D we would call those like the role play moments, you know, like the slower moments when action's not really happening and it's just characters talking or developing and stuff. They used his age, I felt, more as like a tool for him to be like a character who has kind of become like not desensitized, what's the word, where it's like you no longer like believe in it, or like what's the word, Will?
Dissociated?
No, not dissociated. Disillusioned. He's kind of become disillusioned with everything. He's like very down in the dumps about all of it because no one cares about men like him anymore. No one really, he did all these great things no one really cares about. But then all the action scenes and stuff happen, and then they're just like, the most that I found that they did with it was the one line where they're climbing up the rocks and stuff, and he's just like, I'm old, like, you can do it because you're young, but this hurts my hip. And then that was sort of it. That was the only real service that they did with that. But other than that, it didn't really feel like it ever stopped him from doing those really cool, badass moments, which, again, those moments were really badass and really cool looking. The chase in Tiger was so well executed. I thought was so cool and very well constructed. But like, his age didn't really play much part in it. I can't think of really any moments specifically where that stopped him. He did a whole chase through Times Square.
Well, I mean,
not Times Square, like wherever he is. Like, got on a horse, raced a horse through a subway to avoid a train. And he, again, it's a really cool scene. Did all these things, but it just sort of felt like a young Indiana Jones being played by an older actor. So.
I guess. I mean, maybe that comes from, I heard an interview with one of the stunt people on the film, and Harrison Ford was on it's when he was on the horse, and they wanted him to get off the horse so the stunt person could do it, and Harrison Ford's like, no, I'm old, let me look it. So it's, I mean, it definitely came off in the character of how he did the things. Yeah.
But it never stopped him from doing the things, and it never seemed to be impeding him in any way. Like,
that's true.
They could have used that to make the chases and the fights more interesting, but they didn't really. The script said that it happened and therefore it happened, as opposed to like Indy couldn't do it because he was old, so he had to find another way to accomplish that. He sort of just did what a younger Indiana Jones would have done, except he looked older doing it. So
story wise.
No, I'm talking like action wise, like in those scenes. It just I don't know. It didn't look like they actually wrote them with the idea of like, oh, well, he wouldn't be able to do this because of his age. Or have those moments where it would stop, like he'd go to do something and be like, I can't do it, and then switch tactics to accommodate himself or anything like that.
Well, and I think I mean I agree with that, I guess, in terms of action and story. But I mean I think I was thinking more of just, Harrison Ford himself, he can't do certain things that he did in the other films. And that's there was a lot of action in this one, but there was more action with Harrison Ford as Indy in the previous, I guess four films. But
it looked, in the fourth film, it looked bad. And granted, it's been years since I've seen Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But, I mean, him doing those, the stunts didn't look good. They looked fake and all that stuff. And at least in this one, even though there's a lot of moments you can tell, like, okay, this is pretty fake, it's way better done. And it felt more like he's not swinging from the trees with monkeys,
That's true. That was a bad part of the fourth film. But I guess so we can kind of just segue into, I guess, how this film stacks up against the original films in terms of I guess production. To put lightly, because you mentioned how they did certain things that looked better in this one than the fourth one, which I agree. Yeah. But
looks worse than
in other ways, yeah. So, is that okay if I jump? Yeah,
no worries. Okay. I think we should talk. So, what this conversation is going to be about, like the place of certain effects in film,
right?
And then because that's a conversation that I think you're very qualified to have. And then I want to take that and segue off into like how Indiana Jones specifically takes chase and fight scenes and constructs them, and how we can apply that to like writing for other films or stuff like that. Because I think there's a lot that this does right in those. But let's talk about the CGI, which is the big elephant in the room, I feel.
Yeah. And so I know we just kind of touched on it with the train sequence at the beginning of the film a little bit ago. We were talking about that. But one of my biggest, I guess, what's the word?
Gripes.
I guess. I mean, don't get me wrong. I really liked this film. And I'm a huge fan of the original three. And the fourth one was okay up until the end. But so Gabe disagrees, but
usually I don't like the films that you like. So the fact that we kind of fall in the same spot on this one is a little weird. But.
Yeah. But anyway, so one of the things that Steven Spielberg did an amazing job with in the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, and I will say for part of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but really for the original three there, he used practical effects, which, if you're not familiar, means a lot of on-set effects, not CGI. He used models and miniatures and real explosions, and that is one of the things that really made the original Indiana Jones films, one, feel realistic, and to be honest, fun.
Yep.
'Cause it looked and still looks a lot better than a lot of CGI nowadays, and it was all real. They did. Now, I don't want to say that they didn't use any. Of course, at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they open the Ark and all the souls come out,
or like the Kalima when they're like sending them into like hell. And
into the lava.
And stuff,
yeah,
and...
that's I guess the CGI of the time.
Yeah. And it didn't look great. At least I feel like in Temple of Doom, the lava and stuff did not look particularly great. But I knew what it was, or maybe it's just because I'm coming into it.
And was it CGI?
I'm pretty sure there was like some computer. All I remember is like, and this is if you go back and watch a lot of like 80s movies or like older films, the way that they typically get effects, especially on film as opposed to digital, is like by painting things and then overlaying them and overlapping, which is a way to do it that I think CGI has definitely improved the way that we do effects like that. Because when you have to do like overlays on film, on top of film, it doesn't look good. And it worked fine for the time or whatever. But, I think computer generation has definitely improved on moments like those, but we keep using it as a crutch in these instances that Will's talking about. So sorry, I did not mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. Yeah, that's an important thing. But anyway. Yeah. So because I was trying to think in Temple of Doom, I think one of the big one that really didn't age super well was the bridge scene.
Oh yeah.
At the very end of the film when they're hanging onto the bridge on the cliff. You can tell that the background that's not real. It's not location. They added that in. Yeah. So if they were to do that today with modern CGI, that would look better. But anyway, to go back to the main point, I guess, of in those original films, they used more practical effects. And in this one, it was basically all CGI. They did, during the chase scene in Tangier, they did use, real vehicles and
in some instances. I think there's some where you could be like, okay, that's that's the problem is that most of the time it's like, okay, well that's CGI, but sometimes just every once in a while you get ones where it's like, oh, I can't really tell if that's practical or CGI or not, and then whoever did the VFX is just like, whoa, we tricked them, we got it.
Yeah,
and then but it's like you messed up 98% of what you did, and you had 2 frames where I couldn't tell.
Yeah. But that's an issue with today's films, and specifically this Indiana Jones film stacked up against the others, is they had plenty of opportunity to use practical effects, and they just didn't. They chose to replace certain things with CGI that honestly made it not look as good. Yeah. Specifically, again, I've been talking a lot about the train scene, but they built an actual full-size train for that scene, but most of the shots in the end of the film were CGI'd. Yeah. And it's like, why, And I don't know. That really gets me. And one of the directors that does a great job with modern special effects is J.J. Abrams, and that's because he mixes practical with CGI the right way. In the 2009 Star Trek film, he built a full-sized Enterprise set that they would run from one location to the next, and it wasn't cut CGI'd. And I think he did a good job with that, and that's just what I wish that they did with this film, and that's what Spielberg had started to do in the original Indiana Jones films, is mix practical and CGI.
Well, I think an even better example than J.J. Abrams, because for me at least, J.J. Abrams has a sort of spotty track, because in those Star Trek ones, there's some moments where it's like, okay, yeah, that's a really good mix between them, and then there's other moments where like, wow, that's not. that's not good.
Well, we can argue about that another
but
time.
I think Christopher Nolan.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of his stuff. Although in Dunkirk, he has no excuse for what he did on the beach. There were not that. It was like
that's true.
There was like 100 people on the beach, maybe.
Go back and listen to our first episode.
Yeah, please go back to Dunkirk
you'll hear us talk about that.
because I take issue with that. But most of the time, it does pay off when he does those things. The fight scenes in Inception, all that stuff, like when practical works. But Guillermo del Toro, and this is a quote that everyone always throws around or whatever. He has this quote that I think is really good, where he's like, "You do 80% of it practical." It's either 80 or 90%, and then you do the rest CGI, and that's just supplemental. It's just fixing things that were in there, and that's why his stuff looks so good. In most instances, it looks so good and like visceral and real.
Which Steven Spielberg followed that rule. I mean, I think he kind of. Spielberg used it first.
Well, Spielberg did it primarily out of necessity when it wasn't like too big of a like.
But it just looked better.
Yeah, I mean, it looked better, but that's sort of. I mean, him insisting on practical was a bit of like, "Ooh, this guy's going to do a practical or whatever." But when you're making films in the 80s, that's way different than making films in like the 2000s. Because I mean, him being like, "I'm going to do it all practical" in the 80s is one thing. But then you see the Indiana Jones movie that he made in the 2000s, and that goes out the window because you have all these fun, fancy toys to play with. So it's one thing to say, I'm going to do it all practical in the 80s, when, it's a lot... doing computer-generated stuff was way harder back then, and it was way more limited in scope. But nowadays, it's harder to say no to computer-generated images because it's so much cheaper. There's, like, the barrier for entry is so much lower. Almost everyone knows how to operate or can learn how to operate basic basic tools for not editing, but like computer generated images. And especially now with AI, like anyone in an afternoon can start developing their own like sceneries and pictures and stuff with almost no real technical training. And obviously you're not going to get hired on a movie like that, but still the basic minimum knowledge is like, was like way up here when he was doing things in like the 80s and 90s and stuff. But now it's like down here, so it's way more accessible, way cheaper, and way easier to get a hold of.
Yes, but I would argue that a lot of the CGI effects that are made in movies today are based off of practical things that he did in the late 60s, 70s, 80s. Because, I mean, he's been making films for more than half of more than half of the time that films have been in existence. No. So the fact, he's you could argue he's the grandfather of a lot of effects that we see in movies today, CGI or not, based off of, Lucas and Spielberg with Star Wars, Raiders or Indiana Jones, Jaws, Close Encounters. Yeah. There's you can go on and on. E.T. He did so many, and E.T. I think was a mix of CGI and
but again, it was the CGI was used sparingly enough that you typically didn't notice, or it was stuff at the time that nowadays we can look at the Flash 2023 and see those babies and be like, what the, like, you can do so much better than that. Why didn't you do better than that? But the time of E.T., if you look at those effects, everyone watching it would be like, I don't know that you could do that any other way than they did it. Like, I don't know that you could do it any way that would have looked better, would have looked more real, especially at the time. But nowadays, because it's so, like, again, the barrier for entry is so much lower and it's so much cheaper, there's so much better ways to do it, but they keep leaning on it as a crutch because, I mean, this was a $300 million movie. And that's with all the CGI and stuff. But they had the train and everything already built. But still, that inflates the cost dramatically. It would have been like a $400-500 million movie, I think. So it saves a lot of money, but it doesn't look as good. I'm just glad
as having what?
So
it doesn't look quite as good with CGI or with
no,
practical?
with CGI, it definitely doesn't look as good as it would have had they done like almost everything practically.
Yeah.
But also, there's so much they would be so much more limited in scope. Like, I don't think you could have gotten the subway chase scene. I don't know that you could have gotten the full effect of like going through a whole Nazi encampment and stuff during an evacuation and the bomb drop.
I mean, so I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No,
I
yes.
do almost disagree with you on this, which we rarely disagree.
No, we always disagree, but it's usually me cutting you off
that's
for
true.
it. So I'm very proud of you.
So anyway, so I don't mean to cut you off, but I do disagree a little bit, partly because of this new film coming out. Some of you might be familiar as Oppenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Nolan used 100% practical effects for that film.
He blew up Japan.
Again?
Yeah.
Oh,
thrice!
Sorry.
What are we going to get after anime?
But anyway, I'm really curious to see.
But what was the budget of Oppenheimer? And what was is Oppenheimer going to have massive chase scenes through multiple different exotic locations?
It might.
Travel back in time.
I mean, they set off a nuclear bomb in the film.
A nuclear device. Let's not be too hasty here.
Well, if you're familiar with history.
Yeah.
So let's see. So I'm searching the budget for.
In the meantime, what we'll do is that look up Oppenheimer style on YouTube. Someone made a trailer for Oppenheimer, but it was released in 2014. Very fun. 100 million USD.
100 million for all practical effects for Oppenheimer. Well,
for a movie where they blow up 2 bombs.
But
in this film, I don't know how many bombs went off, but I know how many massive chase scenes there were
in Indy,
in Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and I would say though that there were many instances in Indiana Jones where they could have used practical. They could have built the Roman army at the end of the film. They could have built little miniatures, which they did for all the other films. In the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the 4th film, they did build a miniature town, and they used practical effects to blow it up at the beginning of the film when they're doing the nuclear testing out in the desert, and this town gets blown up with Indy in it. They built a miniature town, and they actually, blew it up, and that was a practical thing, but a miniature. So I feel like that this film could have used practical effects given its $300 million budget.
Yep. All right. So you probably looked at the length of this episode and thought, hey, this one's a reasonable length, unlike The Flash 2023 review. It's not. It's not. We sat down to talk about
2 hours?
this. Yeah, it's like we sat down to talk about this one, and we just kept doing it. I just kept doing it. Let's be real here.
Well, I did too, though.
Yeah, Will was very talkative this episode.
Yeah.
So, good news. Next week, you get to watch Will be even more talkative because we're splitting this one into 2 parts. That's right. We didn't just end our conversation in a weird spot. We paused our conversation in a weird spot. So part 2 will be coming out next week, and then after that we will have Barbie and Oppenheimer's. I think is what's going to be coming up next.
Correct.
So yeah, thanks.
Thanks. Join us next week for part 2.
Mm-hmm.